Steven, how are you doing?
I'm good, Joel. It's good to see you, my friend.
You too. You've made it back from your around the world trip, 4 time zones in a week or two. Are you not struggling at all with uh, jet lags and I mean, you do it quite a bit. You're not on the road every week to different
Right.
time zones, but there's a considerable amount of trips you do per year.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a bit of a yo-yo situation. Like when you go on a time zone, I find myself I do okay going east. So when I'm headed to Europe and spend, 3, 4 days there, and then I come back to the United States, it seems to somehow be okay with my body. When I go west, like even if I go to California, sometimes it just has a big impact on me. When I come back, I feel sort of out of sorts. It's really hard for me to get back on the time zone. In this case, I was out in Asia, so I was way west I took the the westward route to Asia,
Yeah.
past California, Washington, Alaska, down to Japan. So it was a very different feeling this last week. I also got COVID last week. Well, I discovered I had COVID. So when I came back from the weekend where I was in Chile and I got, I don't know, I started to feel like on Sunday night kind of symptoms of COVID, and I was like, oh, maybe I don't have COVID. And then I took a test and I didn't test positive, and I waited 2 days, still sick, and I waited 2 days and I had it. So it was fine. It was actually quite mild by the weekend. This past weekend, 4th of July, everything was fine. So it
Yeah.
all it all worked out.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I don't know that I didn't knew that COVID's still around. To me, that's a 2022 thing at most,
Yeah.
or at least
Yeah,
I'd
I mean
like to
it.
keep it that way.
Well, 2025 COVID, at least for me, felt like, a bad head cold, or maybe even lighter. It was more like a, bad post-nasal drip. So thank God that it's gotten a little bit better for some, I hope.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, to describe today's episode the best, I'm very excited to say that we've gotten our first letter from a listener, and
It's awesome.
that person tapped into a topic that I want to dive in with you today. And for starters, I'll just read that letter. It's a person that would like to stay anonymous, and I'll say that person's age, but not their gender and name, and just general information. If people reach out to us and have questions, we'll keep them anonymous unless they specifically ask us not to, and if that makes any sense to involve their name and identity into that conversation. But this person is 26 years old, and the letter goes as, Hey Joel, hi Stephen, I've been listening since episode 1, and I like the way you discuss work purpose and what actually matters without sugarcoating it. There's something I've been thinking about lately that I wanted to share, and maybe it's worth turning into an episode. It is. Thank you. I'm 26, I'm studying history, and I'm not trying to become some high powered executive or build a startup from scratch. I'm not anti work, but I don't want my job to define me either. I just want a life where I earn enough to live comfortably, enjoy a few nice things each year, and not constantly stress about money or keeping up. That seems reasonable, but it starts to feel like even that's too much to ask. The way people talk about success today, online especially, makes it seem like if you're not constantly grinding, networking, or building a personal brand, then you're falling behind. But what if you just don't want that? I'm not lazy, I care about doing meaningful work, but I also care about time, relationships, and having some peace in my life. And I think there are a lot more people like me than it seems. People who aren't chasing status, we're just trying to build something stable, healthy, and enough. So here's my question. What if you're not ambitious? At least not in the way ambition is usually defined. And is that still okay in today's world?
It's a lot to
That
unpack
is,
there.
I was about to say, there's a lot of info in this. Number one, again, thank you so much for this letter and for this input. The first impulse I have, and because this person mentioned they're studying history, they're gonna probably do something in the space of museums or research or maybe even
Yeah.
a teaching.
Writing, teaching.
Yeah, I'd say it strongly varies. The question is that still okay in today's world? I'd say it strongly varies to whatever industry you're in.
Look, I first at the highest level, this person is saying, I don't want work to define me. I want to
Hmm.
define work, right? I want to define my own terms as it relates to how I spend my time, what I focus on. that the career for them, it sounds like it is a more of a enjoyable kind of maybe intellectual, spiritual kind of pursuit where they're doing work that they appreciate and they like, and they're not really fixed on driving themselves, say, to the highest level. Let's pretend they're a teacher teaching history, but they don't have aspirations to move beyond being a teacher. They don't want to be an author. They don't want to be a professor at a university or a college. They just want to be a teacher. And I'm not saying that they want to just clock in 9 to 5 and have summers off like some we have here in the United States. It's more like they don't, and I think we did said this like in one of the episodes. It's like there's this approach which is like I live to work or I work to live, and you think about working to live, which is really more about what this person's alluding to, is that they know they have to have some kind of career, some kind of job responsibility, but they're not obsessed with it. They're not obsessed with the accomplishments to drive them up and up and up the ladder. And the environment, by the way, could play a very positive effect to this person's life. I mean, if they're working in a school or they're doing research, they're not going to have some of the dynamics that maybe the corporate world has. And I think that's actually their environment, what they choose to do, where they choose to work, could help them accomplish this more of this balance that they're seeking. And by the way, there's absolutely nothing wrong with not wanting to be totally driven by success. With last episode, we talked about the entrepreneurial spirit and what's driving like the folks like an Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or some of the other juggernauts in technology field. It's okay. You don't nobody said you had to be Steve Jobs and, work, 24 hours a day and be cutthroat and ruthless, right? That's not what life's about. Right. What life's about is finding the balance between, what we need for survival and what we love in our lives. It's people, it's, experiences, it's perspectives. It's, these are all different things that don't have a monetary value. We put monetary values around them. We say, well, we have to go to the very best vacation somewhere, or we want to go to the Riviera. We don't want to, just settle for something, kind of small and low key. We want to go high key,
Yeah.
And so that's how it works. I mean, if we put our emphasis on things and money and success and obtaining these new levels, almost like a video game, if we drive ourselves in that direction, well, we're going to be consumed by that. Now, again, just like taking it easy and living a life that's more focused on experience, meaning there are some people that want to drive that hard towards success, and that's how they think, that's how they tick. So it's not that either is bad or wrong, they're just different.
Well, you just have to find a way to make it work in today's society. You mentioned Elon Musk, and I want to tap into this. As we said, we're not a political podcast, but his function at Doge, I think, was you can hate it or love it. That's not what this is about. What I'm tapping into, what I'm saying is, I think you saw two very fundamental ways of understanding the world collide there. Things like child support, food stamps, these social programs that support people through bad times, that have a very social aspect, are from a standing of wealth and success for a society to be able to finance that and to provide that. Now, what Elon Musk is saying, and I'm rationalizing and cutting it short, so don't quote me on this, but basically he's slashing everything because he's saying it costs a lot of money, but it really doesn't make a lot of money. So I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I feel like we're falling to we're only using one scheme of rating things in the way of success or no success, in a very capitalistic and economic way of saying, does this make money or does this not make money? So if somebody says, I want to be a teacher, I want to help the next generation to flourish and to be well educated and to be well mannered, that's a very honorable thing. But for someone individually looking at salaries for teachers in the US, for example, that's a heavily underpaid career. So on one side, you have the drive in yourself to do that career for whatever purposes and morals you want to do. But at the same time, you're faced with raising prices, with inflation, with the reality that everything's getting more expensive, and you got to find a way to hitch yourself to that wagon, or you're going to get left behind. So I do see that conflict from a very realistic point of view on the economic side of things.
It's interesting. You mentioned a couple of things. The concept of this Doge experience, an experiment rather, is that, there's a tremendous amount of spending that goes on. And we're talking about the US government here. I don't know about other
Hmm.
governments, but there's a tremendous amount of spending. And, the funny thing is like, it's all beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So there's
Hmm.
one politician who puts money in a bill that gets passed that is for some purpose, and another one on a completely different opposing team puts another bit of money in. And reality is, at the end, it's not the individual requests, it's the aggregation of those requests. So what happens is, after a bill gets passed, you realize they open it up and they go, oh my God, there's like, $2 trillion worth of spending in here. And each one of those individuals who's, constructed that bill and brought those budgetary asks to the table, they all have their individual interests and they're not aligned with each other. And even in the same party, they're not aligned. They're very
Hmm.
fractured, right? There are some like standard things that everybody does, like military and defense, and
Yeah.
whether they're like hawks or they're just moderates, they still put money in the bucket for that. The spending and the hubbub about, this big, beautiful bill thing is the cutting of waste, fraud, and abuse from the system. And again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's all about perspective. So some folks in different parties are going to have different views of what is waste, and some are going to say, no, that's essential, that's needed, right? So
Hmm. Hmm.
that whole concept is very similar to what we see in business, where we looked at a portfolio of products and we say which ones are performing, which ones are underperforming. And you're tapping into an element of portfolio management when one says, well, there's two aspects of this. One is, not all of my products are going to be winners. And so I have to have a diversified approach. I need to be in the market in order to compete with my biggest competitors, even if my products are not as good. And this happens all the time, by the way. There's companies who compete in, I don't know, say the technology field or in the biotech field or whatever, and they have a product that's not their star, but they have to continue to invest in it in order to be a part of that, participate in that market. Internally, they look at these things and they go, okay, this thing is not delivering the kind of results that we needed to, so we're going to cut back spending on that product. And we need it. We absolutely need it because we need to compete in this market. It's our very best shot at competing, but we're not going to invest heavily into this. It's
Hmm.
going to be what we call dogs and stars. Dogs are like the products that may have, at one point they might have been a leading product, but yet we've sort of pulled back. They've reduced in their market share, they've reduced in their market appeal, and we're now going to sort of cut back on spending, and we're going to retract somewhat on innovation, and thus the result will be stagnation for that product at some point. And then there are the stars, the ones that don't make any money, but we're going to dump a ton of money into, and we're going to invest and invest and invest, and with the hope that that star becomes, truly our leading product and defining our market, maybe a new market, et cetera. And so in business is very similar to what you're seeing in this government experience. Which is, there's certain things that are priorities, there's certain things that are not priorities to the political parties in power, and they're going to make these decisions. Both of them are making the decision based on the economic impact to their environment, whether it's a product portfolio or it's an annual budget or a 4-year budget for Congress and the White House. So this is very complex stuff. Now, when you talk about these individuals making trade-offs, essentially what this is, these are trade-offs. These are big bets. We don't necessarily know what the impact will be in a year or in 2 years or 4 years of these new spending cuts. They could be very, very impactful personally to give, a given set of people, a given economic class. They could be impactful in other ways to the entire economy. The story is yet to be told. There are people with perspective. There are folks out there that from both sides of the different parties, both sides of the aisle, that will have different perspectives on this. I encourage you to watch the news, CNN,
Hmm.
Fox, or whatever your choice is, right? Um, you tapped into another angle, which is, the kind of work. Do we value the kind of work that a teacher does versus an
Hmm.
engineer? It's
People
interesting.
that work in healthcare, so many
Yeah,
social
yeah,
jobs are
yeah,
falling behind in pay, and they're
yeah.
they're going back to the pandemic. There was a term essential workers. So a banker wasn't allowed, or I don't know about a banker, but most of the jobs weren't allowed to go into the office and when there were lockdowns. But people that worked in healthcare, that worked in schools, they were allowed under the
They were,
quarantine
yeah.
restrictions to go to do whatever they needed to do. And most of these jobs, especially in Germany, like nurses in Germany are definitely underpaid. People that take care of their elderly are underpaid. Teachers are underpaid. And where I see the disconnect is the level of how we understand success and the economic side of things, like money in versus money
Yeah.
out, to, like, for example, one of the best things, or probably the best thing as an individual human being everyone can do, is to have a child, because the likelihood of that child being a very positive contributor to the economy of a society is very high. But up front, that child costs, I think, on average $1 million for those 18 years of child care. So at first, I mean, Elon Musk probably, I mean, he has a lot of kids. He has a different approach to that. But on the first perspective, it would probably be an economic train wreck to have a child.
There's just so many complex things that you've just mentioned, which all deserve their own episodes. The idea that there would be certain jobs that have greater value in the economy or perceived as having greater value. Healthcare job, back to the essential comment. This is, during the pandemic, these people were absolute gods. They're the only ones that could figure this
Mm-hmm.
stuff out. Of course, we had the scientists building vaccines and things like that. We had government and other organizations trying to solve problems and fix things their own ways. But society, we look at what the person does and we put a value around them.
Mm-hmm.
A teacher's value is to inform and instruct, to teach students, right? And this is for both, of our societies, it's a decades plus experiment. It is from the very youngest in the kindergarten range, the early childhood education, all the way through middle school into what we call high school or college and university. College in Europe, and then university would be, beyond secondary school into university. Each one of those teachers in your life has a tremendous amount of importance
Mm-hmm.
where you are in that sort of timeline. Do we value teachers? My sister's a teacher. She's a retired teacher. She was a teacher for 35 plus years. She had a very rewarding career. She decided to be a teacher because she wanted to give back and she wanted to make an impact in young people's lives. She focused. She got her extra degree and she got tenure and she rose up the ranks even from a teaching perspective, right? Within a regional school, a middle
Mm-hmm.
school. The idea there is that, there's still this trajectory of success, even for people that you might perceive as sort of being sort of focused on a particular job and a role and a task that, doesn't move a lot from a career perspective. It moves from an experience perspective. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily move from a graduation of roles. From her perspective, there were opportunities. She took those opportunities to be able to take on more and more and more. And that goes down to the earlier point from the listener who wrote, which is, what do I want to get out of this? Do I want to be super active in my pursuit based on what I do, or do I want to sort of like just do what I really need to do every day just so I can get home and do the things that I really love and I really want to do? When I think about how we value careers, if you compared like bankers, stockbrokers to teachers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, or athletes, professional athletes, this is in your
Mm-hmm.
domain. We have such a twisted view, and you'll see these memes and comparisons about people like teachers or healthcare workers versus, Hollywood actors, sports figures, or, maybe in the finance realm, like stockbrokers. They're paid an exorbitant amount of money. Their value could be perceived as overinflated. And then, by the way, I don't have any judgment on that. If somebody,
Mm-hmm.
stockbroker, finance person gets their degree, goes to Wall Street, makes, a killing on the market, makes a huge living. I don't personally, I've always said this, what you get is what you get. That's your deal. If you're LeBron James and you're clocking in, I don't know, it was 100 in his first deal after high school or during high school, it was
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
140 or some $1 million contract. That's his deal. All right.
Yeah.
There's somebody else isn't going to get that deal. If you're a CEO and you're making $20 million a year, there are people that really have a hard time with that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't. I actually don't. That's their deal. That's what they got. The board of directors and the
Hmm.
shareholders wanted that person and they're willing to pay them $20 million a year. You can
Yeah.
ask, well, why does a CEO get 20 million and a teacher gets 75,000 a year? These are questions.
There was someone once that explained that whole why do athletes make so much money compared to a teacher, and they said, well, there is a basic need and for this athlete, and then you ask there's a need for this athlete. There's an industry that cares about basketball that wants to see the best of the best go at it, and then there is the reality that LeBron James or Lionel Messi in soccer or Tom Brady back during his football days were the best ones at providing that. And I've seen absolute superstars as teachers who had a world of opportunities to go get another job in another country for a lot more money than, like, the director of my high school. I know that he was at a German school in China before he came out to mine in Cologne, where I did my high school diploma. And after a few years, went somewhere else to England, I believe, for presumably a lot more money. So there is that level of this, in the same way it is with an athlete. Like, if you're good at what you do, there's going to be opportunities for you to also benefit from it financially as well.
Well, I mean, look at Scott Galloway. I mean, totally different, kind of a hybrid, right? But, his background is he wasn't a great student. He went to UCLA. He graduated. He became an investment banker. He kind of hit it in the early days when maybe life wasn't as hard. He went into finance. He didn't love that. He then went into consulting and advertising. He made a killing, but he also had a few failures too. Because again, this
Hmm.
entrepreneurial spirit, you're willing to try anything, do anything. And if it fails, it fails. You move on and you learn. And then eventually he became, because of all his experience and his notoriety as a successful entrepreneur, he became a professor.
Hmm.
I remember I was in a class with him. I took many classes with Scott and over the last 3 years, 4 years. And I remember being in a class and him saying that the class that he was teaching us, which was an online adult education class, he said, if you took this at Stern in NYU, the Stern School of Management, he said this would cost you for the class, this would cost around $20,000 for each of you. And so just for the class, it was about 20K. And and for us, it was, it was part of a subscription um, to an online adult education system, which was really cool. And we still got access to Scott. We're able to ask Scott questions and he gave us answers and we
Yeah.
interacted with him. We learned a ton from him, right? We didn't take a, 14-week, traditional semester based college class with him, but we took, we got to see him a couple times over, 2 weeks. But reality is he was paid a tremendous amount of money at Stern, and now he's podcasting and he's been writing books for years and he's been making a ton there. The guy's worth over $100 million. Now you're asking, is he worth $100 million? Should he have 100? Sure. He's gone off and done all that hard work. Could he been a teacher and made a similar or even greater impact? I mean, it's
Hmm.
arguable. Could he have made a greater impact if he just focused on being a college professor for 20 plus years versus, dipping in and out of finance and then moving into advertising and then, being a consultant to Fortune 500 brands to,
Hmm.
writing books to then becoming a professor at a top, management school and then later becoming a top podcaster. He's got reach because he's done all those things, but could he have been an equal
Hmm.
success? Monetarily, he might not have been an equal success. He might have been
Hmm.
pretty well paid still, but the question
Yeah.
becomes, where do we put our value, right? He put his value on this diversity of what he was working on in his career, and that's fine. And he's got
Hmm.
tremendous outcome. If you value success and money, he talks about, I just saw, and I've read this in The Algebra of Wealth, which is one of his recent books. He talks about how do you, what is it to feel rich?
Hmm.
And basically, what it is to feel rich is that you have more income coming in than money going out. And you have
Hmm.
basically excess income. And that excess income works for you passively,
Hmm.
like through an
Hmm.
investment account or a real estate investment or something like that. And look, there are people in this world. I've seen and I've known people that are like, they spend everything they make, right? They're
Hmm.
very obsessed with materialism. They would never think about saving and investing, and even investing their money into, causes that they
Hmm.
would want to see positive outcomes from. But they're like spending money as fast as they can. They're living like
Hmm.
really up to the limit. You know what I mean? And so, but that's how they choose to live their life.
Yeah.
And when you look at that in contrast, like, okay, the guy who squirrels it away and, saves every penny, and
Yeah.
he doesn't have anything to show from an experience perspective, versus this person over here who just spends it before they have it. And all they do is experience it. I talk, my son is 26, and we talk about, and you'll associate with this sort of movement, but like this particular age group cares more about experience than they do about things, or they
Hmm.
care more about experience than they do about these accomplishments. Like going and having a destination wedding is a very popular
Yeah.
concept to folks in this 25 to 35 age bracket right now in this generation. And it's because they value experiences. They capture those experiences in social media. They share them with their friends and family. Some of the friends they've never met in their lives, but yet they share their most
Yeah.
personal, intimate things with
Yeah.
online. But
Yeah.
it's like, where do you put your, back to the question of the stockbroker versus the teacher, who's more important, who should be paid more? Is like, where do we put our emphasis and our focus, and where do we put our, if you will, priority? Is it on money, wealth, fame, or is it on, you know, impact and accomplishment from the perspective of making ourselves feel like we have done what we were meant to do? Purpose, I guess, is a better way of saying it.
Hmm.
I mean,
The
those are
thing,
two different dimensions of our society.
absolutely, yeah. The thing we tell ourselves in our generation when we spend money is we're gonna be able to make that money back that we just spent on this vacation, but we're never gonna get the situation back of being 25 and in Venice, for example.
No.
And I mean, you've probably heard of this. Klarna is a payment service from the Netherlands that started to offer pay in like rates. Like if you get a order of clothing
Hmm.
from some online store, instead of paying all of it up front, you can get a 6 month fixed rate, and it's a big debt trap for a lot of young people. Just tremendous amounts of debts have been piled up. There's a lot of truth to it, and I at times live like that as well, where I just take opportunity over a more logical thing. But I think there's some delusion in this where people sort of try to fix their bad behavior into this mantra. I do want to talk about the mental health aspect of this hustle culture, some people call it as well. And I'll tell you why. I ran into an old friend of mine at a birthday party a few months ago, and he goes to school for anthropology and history. He's currently getting a master's. And let's say that guy he's the typical kid. Comes from a good family, a little outside of the German town down south. A couple of brothers, not a rich family, but definitely not a poor family. Good education, never really had to work too hard for anything. And I don't know what, let's say, transpired for him to say what he said to me, but he said, all I want is to make 3 grand a month and for people to leave me alone. I've given up on the I'm going to strive for something, I'm going to grow, I'm going to get better. I just want to sit in a archive, look at my documents, make sure they don't mold, make my 3 grand and let people leave me alone. And I had to check myself on it because obviously I'm in a realm and in a space where I surround myself with athletes, with entrepreneurs, with people like yourself and others that are where this is just a vital part of our lives, our careers, and just the level of self development. And we love it. It's what we do. And that's why I love this letter that we got, because it's something we kind of forget, that there's another way of living this life
Yeah. Yeah.
in the midst of everything that we do. And if you look at the numbers, I don't really have any major statistics to point to, but you can definitely see a trend, especially in the younger generations, in terms of mental health, that are very concerning. yes, there is a level to mental health where people sort of self diagnose themselves, and you have to ask the question, are you just feeling bad or are you actually depressed? And where not everyone has borderline or not everyone has depression or anxiety, but things are hard right now, honey. But it's a concerning level of mental health situations for a lot of people in Western societies that feel this enormous amount of pressure. And as you always say, and I always say, not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone is meant
That's
to
right.
be an athlete. Not everyone is meant to be an executive. As that person wrote, is that enough? Is that okay for me to not want everything and to kind of shield myself away from this, as they probably would say, toxic culture?
It's absolutely fine and normal to not want to be the tippity top of this ladder. Some people are intimidated by the process. We talked about imposter syndrome as
Mm-hmm.
well, which, people, even if they're educated and they have experience, they still don't feel like they can do the job that they're in, or that they, that they're being asked to do. This is another dimension. Health issues that you mentioned, they were further exacerbated by the pandemic. I mean, if you go back to the pandemic, there was a tremendous amount of isolation. There's a lot of depression associated with lack of
There's
physical connection.
Absolutely. There's a lot of people, sorry, but there's a lot of people that also say, scientists that say, a lot of these developments that we saw throughout COVID, throughout the pandemic, were the pandemic served as an accelerator to
Mhm.
some of these things.
Yeah.
They didn't just create them. If it's not like if the pandemic didn't hit, then we would be all okay and mental health wasn't as big. It was an accelerator because everything hit so fast. But so
This is
absolutely.
an interesting angle because the pandemic forced people to separate. Families had to separate, like, grandma was in the assisted living facility or the nursing home. You couldn't go visit her. God forbid she passed away during that period and there was no closure. That's a tremendous impact mentally.
Yeah.
The kids, the adults. You're already dealing with one of the most stressful events in medical history in the last 100 years for us, and now we're dealing with loss and separation and things like that. Those are horrible things. What I think is even worse, and that was bad, but what I think is worse is that technology has created a wedge between people. It's
Hmm.
created a wedge in our society that, and you're starting to see a self selection. People are actually choosing to not engage with each other in the physical. And I think
Hmm.
this is the detrimental effect of technology, which is, I don't want to have authentic relationships. I don't want to physically be with somebody. There are people that are dating each other that they've never met each other. They've
There's
never
people that
been
are
on a
dating AI. There's
yeah,
people that are
yeah, yeah,
dating
yeah,
their Chat
yeah.
GPT. Like I was sitting at a another little just gathering with friends, and one of the girls there said, I call my Chat GPT, whatever you want to say, my friend or whatever. I call him babe and I tell him I love you and he says it back. Is that concerning? And I had no answer because this was so far away from me to have
Yeah,
that level of, I guess, intimacy
yeah.
to to AI. And then, I mean, the thing we might be more familiar with is the issues with pornography and how it changes the sex life with younger people especially. But I mean, with AI and just technology, as you said, gives it a
You're
different
being
dynamic.
Your generation in particular is being bombarded with over sexualization. You're
Hmm.
being bombarded with a narrative that you could do everything online and you can make $300,000 a month.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're, going back to the person's letter, it's like, if you're one of these people in this age bracket that doesn't have all the real world experiences, and
Hmm.
and through the virtual world experience of social media, you're being bombarded that, I could see why people are like, I don't want this.
Hmm.
I don't want to pretend I'm a Kardashian and, live the high life and drive a, Lamborghini and have, tons of gold chains, whatever
Yeah.
the symbols are. But like, you go on any Instagram reel, like, you just keep on going through a feed, and you're gonna find people talking about. I see it all the time. Mr. Beast makes $100 million a year. He's worth $100 million or something like that. It's like,
Hmm.
my son knows who Mr. Beast is. I don't even follow Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast is evidently some amazing, social media entrepreneur. The point is, you're being bombarded by this stuff. every single day, minute, hour, whatever. And you're coming away from like this and saying, if I'm not doing this, am I not a success? If I'm not doing this, is there something wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
You're getting these overly sexualized, images and videos. Half of them are AI. You're saying if you're, female, you're saying this is what this is what guys want. I have to
Mm-hmm.
live up to this, or conversely, this is what girls want. This is what guys, these what I'm seeing in the feed is what counterparts and in society want. And so
Mm-hmm.
this becomes a question of, and it's like advertising. Advertising is telling us what they want us to be or what they want us to think. So we see this over and over again. You should be making $300,000 a month as a social media influencer. You can do it. You should be with this hot woman or this hot guy. You should want to go to these far off locations because none of your friends have been able to get there.
Mm-hmm.
You start to see these in your feed and you're bombarded from a variety of angles. Every platform does this. And next thing, you're feeling less than. You're feeling
Mm-hmm.
like, if I'm not doing these things, if I'm not a part of this society in this way, I'm less than. And I think this is really detrimental. And so
Yeah.
no wonder why you have people like your friend saying, I'll just go off the grid. And as long as I make $3,000 a month to support my lifestyle, I do not want all this pressure. I just want to have enough to live so that I can have the things in my life which I consider important. I think this is an important aspect of the equation, which is, what do we value as important? I think if we could do
Mm-hmm.
an inventory on what we consider essential, what do we
Mm-hmm.
need? What are our needs versus our wants? This is a classic sort of psychological experiment. What do we need to survive? What do we want outside of that? I used to live in Los Angeles after I graduated from college. And I lived in a small apartment. And the people who knew me and been to this apartment, they would tell you it was smaller than a closet. I had slept on the floor on a cushion from a couch. I got two cushions from a couch that was being thrown away, and I put a sheet over it, and that was my bed. And I slept
Mm-hmm.
on the floor like that. I had my, clothes over in the corner. My wife will laugh. She'll joke and she'll say, you had a milk crate for a coffee table. Point is, was I happy at that point? Well, I was kind of happy because I was exploring this new life in this new city that I didn't know very well. And I was trying to pursue my art, which was focused on film scoring and film music. And the point of it is, I was willing to make all those sacrifices. None of those things, I didn't care about any of those things. None of the things were important to me. The fact that I slept on the floor on some used couch cushion, I could care less. I walked
Mm-hmm.
to work. I took the bus in LA. If you live in LA, I hope people are listening. If you live in LA and you take the bus, it's like the ninth ring of hell. It's horrible. It's like no one walks in LA. I walked everywhere. I have,
Mm-hmm.
maybe better, muscular legs for it. I don't know. But the reality here is I did things because normally others wouldn't do, or they would just sort of say, nobody does that, because I didn't care about those things. I wasn't driven to buy a car. I wasn't driven to live in
Mm-hmm.
a fancy apartment. I wasn't driven to be hanging out with a group of people that, that looked a certain way or acted a certain way. That just wasn't my priority. That wasn't what I
Mm-hmm.
needed. So if
Yeah.
we focus on what we need versus what we want,
Mm-hmm.
then we start to get a better, clearer picture of what we need to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully those things align, like that's important to me or that's not important to me. If we live in this endless pit of desire and greed and jealousy, it's possible that we live a very unfulfilled life because we see what others have through
Mm-hmm.
social media, or it's our neighbor, or it's our cousin, or whatever. And we look at them with envy, and we
Mm-hmm.
continuously just are jealous and envious of their success and of what we think success should be. We're not there. If we're comparing ourselves continuously to others, we're going to feel bad. We're going
Mm-hmm.
to feel less than. So reality is, it's hard to say this. Not everybody has this foundational security that they feel good about who they are and they feel good inside them. It's, inside their skin. Some people
Mm-hmm.
don't feel good inside their skin, so they look externally for things to fill that void. If you
Mm-hmm.
feel really good about who you are, you have a good sense of who you are, you have good self-worth, you have self-esteem, and I'm not taking any of these things for granted, because people could be like, you know what, I have a terrible life, shitty upbringing, horrible parents, bad situations, poverty, all those things, all of those things impact who we are and how we feel about ourselves. But if you can get to that point where you understand what's important to you, and in
Mm-hmm.
this case, your friend and the person who wrote the letter, the things in the external world don't necessarily matter to those people.
Yeah.
What matters is that they have enough, they feel satisfied, satiated, and that every day they can do the things that matter to them. Over here is a bunch of shiny objects they don't care about. They don't care to obtain them. They don't care to grow in their career to make more money to acquire them. They care about these things over here, and that's all they care about. And that's
Mm-hmm.
fine. And you know what?
Mm-hmm.
God bless them, more power to them, because they're not focused on what all these people are focused on over here, which we would call the rat race, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is this whole hamster wheel mentality where it never can be good enough. And I'm constantly striving for more and more and more and more. Trust me, there is a point in time, and I've said this before on our previous episodes, there is an expiration date. I will not be working anymore. I will not
Yeah.
be focused on this day job anymore. I will not be driven as much. Will I still want to help people? Will I still want to consult? Sure, because that's me, who I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay if you don't. It's okay if you
Mm-hmm.
just want to get through the day so that you can have a great, dinner after work and watch
Mm-hmm.
TV, play a video game, maybe you go for a walk, spend time with your loved ones and maybe your pets. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to live in a mansion on the hill.
Yeah. I mean, depending on if you're religious or agnostic or spiritual or whatever you want to call it, there's different ways to get to that state. But so I have a app on my phone. It's a German app that like tracks all your income and outgoing spending habits and categorizes it and budgeting. It's pretty cool. And I did a trial this year where I deleted social media apps off of my phone for a month at a time. And I mean, I still used it in work context or for the podcast to post stuff, but I didn't privately consume it. And I saw my spending habits plummet in the best way possible. There were no more Amazon orders. There were no more ordering takeout food. I was cooking almost every meal. It had a direct impact, and I think it's really because I was focused a lot more on myself. And I said in the last episode, you should be so focused on growing your own grass that you don't even see what type of lawn your neighbor has, you know?
Right.
And for us, it's prayer and being centered in Christ. For others, it's going to be spirituality. As I said, we don't require anyone to believe in anything that we do to listen to this podcast. So whatever floats your boat is what you should go with. But yeah, I mean, to our listener and the writer of our letter, it's number one. It's about finding what you love, and this is always like a knockoff sentence that everyone just throws in there like hot potato, like do something with it. But it holds true. At the end of the day, that will be the recipe for success, whatever success means to you, is to find something that you love to do every day and to find a way to do it every day while maintaining the life that you want for yourself economically and from a social standpoint and all that stuff.
I mean, look, we've got 75, 85 years on this rock, right? And we have, I'm speaking for myself, maybe you too, but I'm speaking for myself. I want to make an impact in people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
In my family's life, with my spouse, my children, with my parents, my siblings, with my extended family, who I love very much, my friends, my circle of friends around me, and then my community, and that's, I want to make an impact. I want to
Mm-hmm.
help others as much as I can, and it's my nature. That's what makes me tick,
Mm-hmm.
and have I had a great career along the way? Yeah, because maybe I've been able to take the skills I have and apply them in a particular area at a particular time in history. Can I guarantee that in 20 years or 30 years that others like me will have the same success? I don't know, because
Mm-hmm.
things change. But
Mm-hmm.
if you keep the North Star that you define or that you find connection with, in my case, is just helping people, whether it's helping people at work or helping people with their careers or helping friends who have, problems with family or whatever, being there, helping somebody. That's really my purpose. And I don't, it's no deeper than that. It's really trying to being of service to others.
Mm-hmm.
That's my nature. And I think that's yours as well. And
Mm-hmm.
and after we're gone from this place, some will remember us, some won't. And years gone past, they won't know us. Maybe someone will write about us. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
someone will scratch down, oh, I saw Mind the Gap. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
But those guys were really nice. They were very positive.
Yeah.
It's a footnote in life, in history, right? So reality is, while we're here, we have to choose how we spend our time. The person who wrote the letter doesn't want to be overly focused on things that don't matter in their lives. They want to
Mm-hmm.
focus on the things that matter most. It's up to them to define that. I can't
Mm-hmm.
define that. You can't define that. We can't define how they live their life. We can't define what they focus on. We can only say that from our experience, you don't want to have a high powered career. That's fine. You can put your focus into so many other things to make a bigger impact in your own life, in your friends and your family life, in your community's life, charity, giving, contribution to society. There's so many other things you can do that go beyond making money and focusing on your career.
Yeah, well, one last thing, and I think for a lot of young people, one of the name of the game is patience, and it's not just about patience. It's about having the guts to go through some rougher situations that will happen in a young life where you're truly trying to find your path in a world that it's a two-edged sword. There's so many things to do, and some are bluff, some are real, and some you don't even see. But for example, for me, I'm turning 25 this year. I don't have a bachelor's yet. Have I just every time I apply somewhere, or somebody looks at my CV, they're like, "Dude, you're 24. Where are all these things coming from?" So I've done a lot. I tried a few things. I've failed a lot, and it put me into situations where it does not condone with the traditional understanding of success. And then you look across the table and you see people at 22 just finishing their bachelor's and starting a job, and you're like, oh man, I'm falling behind. And but all I can preach, and that's something that I sometimes still struggle with, it's patience. And it's going to put you into rough situations where you're going to have to endure, where you're going to have to sleep on couch cushions, where you have to have a coffee table as a milk crate, but it'll pay off in the end. It's a long process, and most importantly, it's a process no one can tell you exactly how it's going to go. But
It,
I truly hope we answered that letter and the listener's question. It is 100% okay to not start a startup, to not become an executive, to not become a millionaire, but to do what you love to do. You just have to find a way to support yourself and whatever goals and ambitions have financially. But I think, especially in today's world, you're going to find plenty of opportunities.
so that leads me to that clip I sent you the other day by Kevin O'Leary, the interview. Kevin O'Leary is
Mm-hmm.
like a very famous entrepreneur. He's a very successful
Shark
guy.
Tank.
At Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful, I think they call him, his nickname. He's a pretty funny guy too. He's
Yeah.
like on both sides of the fence. He's on like CNN, he's on Fox News, he's everywhere. So he's kind of a universal character, very successful guy
Mm-hmm.
by measure of what he's been able to achieve with his career.
Yeah.
And he says in the clip, he says that there's this concept of signal to noise ratio, and he applies, and this is more of a using an example of a technology approach. Like in radio frequency, there's this thing called signal to noise ratio, signal strength versus the noise in the channel that causes the ability to actually have the channel perform. But this concept of signal to noise ratio in work, in life,
Mm-hmm.
and he talks about it in context to Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. And he says that Jobs was absolutely focused on this concept, which was, if you think about the signal, that's the thing that's important. The noise are the things that are not important. Okay, that's not important. So the signal for him is focusing on the top three things in a single day that he needed to
Mm-hmm.
do. Not
Mm-hmm.
18 things, but the top three things. And he said Jobs was particularly good at the signal to noise ratio, the analysis of this, figuring out what were the three most important things to do in that day
Mm-hmm.
versus a week versus a month versus a year. And not doing 100 million things, but doing three things. And
Mm-hmm.
he talks about Musk as saying he's all signal and no noise, meaning that guy can
Mm-hmm.
zero out all the distractions and not only
Mm-hmm.
get three things done a day, but he can get, all 18 things done and done well. This concept of figuring out what's important to you is akin to the same concept, which is figure out what those top three things in your life are, focus on those things, whether it's your career, success, those things on that side of the map, or it's on making an impact, living life the way you want to by your own terms. Figure out what those signals are, follow your heart there, think through how to obtain those things, get those things done in your life, and everything should fall in place.
Lovely. Well, Stephen, thank you so much. As
Anytime,
always,
Joel.
we strongly encourage any feedback, questions, letters, whatever you have to ask us or to as input. We love it, and we're very happy to make entire episodes out of it, as you saw and heard today. And as always, the last words belong to you, my friend. Send us off.
I'll just say thanks, Joel, for setting up today's session. This was a great topic. There's so much pressure out there on people in all different dimensions and perspectives, and I think this is an excellent topic to explore today. So thank you for bringing it to the table, Mr. Reader Listener who brought it to us. We appreciate your feedback and continue to bring that feedback, and we'll calibrate our topics and themes as we move forward.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.